of massive activity in the Fusag area on his trip from his internment camp to London. Agents in Switzerland reported that every map of the Pas-de-Calais area had been mysteriously bought up. The pieces of a giant puzzle were coming together. Now only one question remained. When would it happen? As April turned to May, Hitler was deluged with all kinds of conflicting reports, rumors, and sightings. The information was confusing, taxing his strained mind, but two nuggets of intelligence seemed to clarify the picture. First, a German agent in England reported that the Allies would attack Normandy, southeast of the Pas-de-Calais, between June 5th and 7th. But the Germans had strong indications that this man was operating as a double agent, and his report was clearly part of an Allied disinformation campaign. The attack would probably be coming at the end of June or beginning of July, when the weather was generally more predictable. Then, later in May, a series of more reliable German spies spotted Britain's top general, Sir Bernard Montgomery, in Gibraltar and then in Algiers. Montgomery would certainly command a large part of any invading force. The invasion could not be imminent if he was so far away. On the night of June 5th, Hitler pored over the maps. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe the plan was for Normandy all along. He had to consider both options. He would not be fooled in what might be the most decisive battle of his life. The British were tricky. He had to keep his forces mobile in case it was Normandy after all. He would not commit himself until he knew for sure. Reading the weather reports for the Channel, stormy that evening, he took his usual sleeping pill and went to bed. Early next morning, Hitler woke to startling news. A massive invasion was underway in southern Normandy. A large armada had left England in the middle of the night, and hundreds of parachutists had been dropped near the Normandy coast. As the day progressed, the reports became more exact. The Allies had landed on the beaches southeast of Cherbourg. A critical moment had come. If some of the forces stationed in the Pas-de-Calais were hurried to the beaches of Normandy, the Allies could be pinned and thrown back into the sea. This was the recommendation of Rommel and Rundstedt, who anxiously awaited Hitler's approval. But through the night and into the following day, Hitler hesitated. Then, just as he was on the verge of sending reinforcements to Normandy, he received word of increased Allied activity in the Fusag area. Was Normandy, in fact, a giant diversion? If he moved his reserves there, would Patton immediately cross the Channel to the Pas-de-Calais? No, Hitler would wait to see if the attack was real. And so the days went by, with Rommel and Rundstedt fuming at his indecision. After several weeks, Hitler finally accepted that Normandy was the real destination. But by then he was too late. The Allies had established a beachhead. In August, they broke out of Normandy, sending the Germans into full retreat. To Hitler, the disaster was yet another indication of the incompetence of those around him. He had no idea how deeply and decisively he had been fooled. Interpretation. In trying to deceive Hitler about the Normandy invasions, the Allies were faced with a problem. Not only was the Führer suspicious and wary by nature, he knew of previous attempts to mislead him and knew that the Allies would have to try to deceive him again. How could the Allies possibly disguise the actual goal of a vast armada from a man who had reason to believe they would try to mislead him and was scrutinizing their every move? Fortunately, British intelligence had been able to provide the planners of the D-Day landings, including Prime Minister Winston Churchill, with information that would prove invaluable to them. First, they knew that Hitler was growing paranoid. He was isolated and overworked, his imagination overheated. He was prone to emotional outbursts, and he was suspicious of everyone and everything. Second, they knew of his belief that the Allies would try to invade the Balkans before France, and that the landing site in France would be in the Pas-de-Calais. He almost seemed to want these invasions to happen, as proof of his superior reasoning powers and foresight. Fooling Hitler into keeping his forces dispersed across Europe and France would give the Allies a slim margin of time in which to establish a beachhead. The key was to present him a picture composed of many different kinds of evidence that would tell him the Allies were doing just what he had thought they would. But this picture could not be made up of all kinds of flashing signs pointing to the Balkans and the Pas-de-Calais. That would reek of deception. Instead, they had to create something that had the weight and feel of reality. It had to be subtle, a mix of banal truths with little falsehoods stitched in. If Hitler saw that in its outlines it supported his expectations, his overactive mind would fill in the rest. This is how the Allies wove such a picture. By late 1943, the British had secretly identified all of the German agents active in England. The next step was to turn them into unwitting double agents by feeding them false information about Allied plans for an attack on the Balkans and Norway, say, and the massing of a fictional army, commanded by Patton, the American general Hitler so feared, opposite the Pas-de-Calais. This army, FUSAG, existed only in piles of phony paperwork and wireless transmissions that mimicked a normal army. German agents were allowed to steal FUSAG documents and intercept transmissions, carefully misleading messages, but at the same time banal and bureaucratic ones, too banal to be seen as fake. Working with film designers, the Allies built an elaborate set of rubber, plastic, and wood that, from German reconnaissance planes, would look like an enormous camp of tents, airplanes, and tanks. The German general, who saw FUSAG with his own eyes, was misled about the direction he was taking toward London. He had actually passed the real army to the west of FUSAG's supposed site, massing for the invasion of Normandy. As the date of the invasion drew near, the Allies left clues combining fact and fiction still more intricately. The real time and place of the invasion were planted with an agent whom the Germans completely mistrusted, giving Hitler the feeling that he had seen through a deception, when in fact he was staring at the truth. Now, if real information on the timing of the invasion somehow leaked out, Hitler would not know what to believe. The Allies knew that reports on the buying up of Pas-de-Calais maps in Switzerland would reach Hitler, and this would have its own realistic logic. As for the Montgomery sightings in Gibraltar, little did the German agents know they were seeing a look-alike, a man trained to act like the general. In the end, the picture the Allies painted was so real to Hitler that well into July he believed in it, long after D-Day had actually happened. Through such subtle deceptions, they had compelled him to keep his forces dispersed, perhaps the decisive factor in the success of the invasion. In a competitive world, deception is a vital weapon that can give you a constant advantage. You can use it to distract your opponents, send them on goose chases, waste valuable time and resources in defending attacks that never come. But more than likely, your concept of deception is wrong. It does not entail elaborate illusions or all sorts of showy distractions. People are too sophisticated to fall for such things. Deception should mirror reality. It can be elaborate, as the British deception around D-Day was, but the effect should be of reality only subtly, slightly altered, not completely transformed. To mirror reality, you must understand its nature. Above all, reality is subjective. We filter events through our emotions and preconceptions, seeing what we want to see. Your false mirror must conform to people's desires and expectations, lulling them to sleep. If the Allies had wanted to attack the Pas-de-Calais, as Hitler suspected, and tried to convince Hitler the attack was coming to Normandy, that would have been a great deal harder than playing on his pre-existing belief. Your false mirror must incorporate things that are visibly true. It must seem somewhat banal, like life itself. It can have contradictory elements, as the D-Day deception did. Reality is often contradictory. In the end, like an Escher painting, you must blend truth and illusion to the point where they become indistinguishable, and your false mirror is taken for reality. By Julius Caesar. What we wish, we readily believe. And what we ourselves think, we imagine others think also. Keys to warfare. In the early history of warfare, military leaders were faced with the following predicament. The success of any war effort depended on the ability to know as much about the other side, its intentions, its strengths and weaknesses, as possible. But the enemy would never willingly disclose this information. In addition, the enemy often came from an alien culture, with its peculiar ways of thinking and behaving. A general could not really know what was going on in the mind of the opposing general. From the outside, the enemy represented something of an impenetrable mystery.